From being one of the most sought-after players in world football,
this is Sancho, he heads for the penalty box, he heads for goal, he finds goal! Jadon Sancho is a player who is going to just keep scoring goals!
Listen, this kid, I think he'll be the best English player in the coming years.
There's some good ones coming through.
There's some great players coming through, so to say that is a big statement, but I believe in him.
To a player nobody wants.
You know, as a player, he's just completely flatlined and gone backwards, hasn't he? So
from being Manchester United's marquee signing,
this is a cool player. Manchester United have signed one of the coolest players around.
To nobody even talking about him. From a player who was putting up insane stats at Borussia Dortmund, to barely even getting on the pitch. What the hell happened with Jadon Sancho? For newer football fans, it's easy to look at Sancho today and wonder what all the hype was about. But those who watched his rise know just how special he used to be. This was one of the most exciting young players in world football. A winger who could glide past defenders, create chances out of nothing. At Manchester City, he tore through youth football with ease, like a fat kid eating cake. In 2017, he helped lead England to the final of the UEFA Under-17 European Championship and was named the player of the tournament. Manchester City knew exactly what they had, so determined to keep him, they offered the 17-year-old a new contract worth around £30,000 a week. A ridiculous figure for an academy player who hadn't even made his senior debut. But for Sancho, money wasn't the issue, opportunity was. When he looked at City's first team, he saw some of the biggest names in world football standing between him and regular minutes. You had Raheem Sterling, Leroy Sané, Bernardo Silva, and Gabriel Jesus all competing for attacking spots, while the club was also pushing to sign new players. No manager was going to guarantee a teenager minutes ahead of established international players, so Sancho rejected City's contract offer despite initially agreeing to it, and after being left out of the club's preseason tour of the United States, he stopped reporting to training altogether. His message was clear, he wanted to leave. On deadline day in August of 2017, Borussia Dortmund gave him exactly what he was looking for. The German club paid an initial £8 million to sign the 17-year-old. In his first season, Sancho scored his first professional goal and got 4 assists in just 12 Bundesliga appearances. Nothing crazy, but keep in mind he was a teenager just experiencing senior football for the first time. It was the second season where he really exploded. Watching him at Borussia Dortmund, it was pure entertainment. He embarrassed defenders and made football look effortless. You know, the complete opposite of watching Garnacho. In the 2018-2019 Bundesliga campaign, Sancho scored 12 goals and produced an incredible 17 assists in just 34 league matches. He was named the Bundesliga's newcomer of the season, earned his first England cap at only 18 years old, and became the youngest player in league history to reach 15 career Bundesliga goals. As brilliant as that season was, it somehow wasn't even his best. The 2019-2020 campaign was when Sancho reached another level entirely. He finished the season with 20 goals and 20 assists in all competitions, including 17 goals and 16 assists in the Bundesliga alone. By the following season, Dortmund had paired Sancho with another rising superstar in Erling Haaland. Together, they became one of the most feared attacking duos in Europe, destroying teams on the counter with their pace, movement, and chemistry. The partnership reached its peak in the 2021 DFB Pokal final, where Sancho scored twice in a dominant 4-1 win over RB Leipzig to lift the first major trophy of his career. By the time he left Germany at just 21 years old, Sancho had scored 50 goals, gotten 64 assists, and produced an astonishing 114 goal contributions in only 137 appearances for Borussia Dortmund. At that point, it genuinely felt like the sky was the limit, so it came as no surprise that Manchester United wanted him so badly. To them, he was the final piece of the puzzle. They already had Marcus Rashford on the left, Bruno Fernandes creating chances through the middle, and now they believe Sancho would finally solve the long-standing problem on the right wing and help take the club back to the top of English football. So, after years of negotiations, United finally got their man. They paid Borussia Dortmund £73 million and handed Sancho a 5-year contract worth more than £300,000 a week. Everything seemed perfectly set up. Sancho arrived at Old Trafford as one of the hottest young players in world football. He had already established himself as one of Europe's most productive wingers, and expectations couldn't have been much higher. Instead, it became the beginning of one of the most dramatic career collapses English football has seen in recent years.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of young talents just disappear because of, obviously, it's come too early and it's got to their heads, and my family have seen this, but luckily enough I've got great people around me to just keep me grounded and humble, and they tell me that what I'm doing is not enough. There's like the likes of Mbappe doing crazy things in PSG, and they're the kind of the people I need to compete with, because obviously I'm so young and he's so young as well. So Yeah, I just got to keep humble and keep grinding, just keep on working hard for the team, so yeah.
Over 3 seasons, he managed just 12 goals and 6 assists in 82 appearances. A ridiculous drop from the numbers he had been producing every week in Germany. So what went wrong? The biggest issue was the tactical fit. At Borussia Dortmund, Sancho played in a team that loved to dominate possession. They patiently worked the ball into dangerous areas, combined quickly around the penalty box, and created constant overloads down the wings. One of the biggest reasons Sancho thrived was because he always had Hakimi flying past him on the overlap, forcing defenders into impossible decisions. If they stayed with Sancho, Hakimi was free. If they followed Hakimi, Sancho suddenly had the space to create. Manchester United played nothing like that. Under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, the team was built around quick transitions and counterattacks. Instead of patiently combining in the final third, United wanted to win the ball and attack open space as quickly as possible. That simply wasn't Sancho's game. He wasn't the type of winger who relied on explosive sprint speed to race away from defenders over 40 yards. His biggest strengths were his close control, quick combinations, and ability to manipulate defenders in tight spaces. Those situations became much harder to find in England. Things became even more difficult when he was often played on the right wing. Now, ironically, as I mentioned earlier, United signed him to solve their problem on that side. But the problem was that Sancho had actually produced some of his best football for Dortmund from the left, where he could cut inside onto his stronger right foot to shoot or thread passes through the defense. At United, that position already belonged to Marcus Rashford. Forced out onto the right, Sancho regularly found himself isolated against physical fullbacks with little support. Unlike Hakimi at Dortmund, Sancho's right back now was Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who was naturally a defensive fullback who rarely provided the same attacking overlaps that helped unlock Sancho's game in Germany. Then there was the physical side of English football. The Premier League demanded constant pressing, long recovery runs, physical duels, and far more defensive work than Sancho had been asked to produce at Dortmund. In Germany, Dortmund often controlled possession, allowing him to conserve his energy for attacking moments. At United, he was expected to sprint back 50 or 60 yards, help his fullback defensively, and compete in physical battles every single week. And just when he needed stability to adapt, the club was anything but stable. Ole was sacked only a few months after Sancho arrived. Like, think about that, the guy who brought him in was suddenly out of a job. Ralf Rangnick then introduced an aggressive pressing system that never truly suited the squad, before Erik ten Hag, aka the Dutch Heisenberg, arrived with his own demanding tactical structure and strict expectations. Every few months the system changed, the manager changed, the expectations changed. For a player already struggling to adapt to a new league, it became almost impossible to build confidence or any sort of rhythm. So instead of landing in an environment designed to maximize his strengths, Sancho found himself trying to adapt to a style of football that exposed almost every single weakness in his game. By the start of the 2023-2024 season, Sancho's United career had gone from frustrating to just completely broken. Ten Hag left Sancho out of the squad for a huge Premier League match against Set Piece FC Arsenal, and after the game he was asked why one of the club's highest paid players hadn't even made the bench. Ten Hag said Sancho had been left out because his performances in training hadn't been good enough.
Jadon was on his performance on the training, we didn't select him.
Within hours, Sancho fired back publicly on Twitter, accusing Dutch Heisenberg of lying. He wrote that people shouldn't believe everything they read, insisted he had trained well all week, and claimed he was made a scapegoat for a long time. He sounds like my buddy that was trying to convince us that he actually goes to his 9-to-5 job. Ten Hag responded by demanding both a public and private apology before Sancho could be even welcomed back into the first team squad. Sancho refused. He believed he had been treated unfairly and wasn't willing to back down. For the next 4 months, Sancho was effectively exiled from Manchester United's first team. We're not talking about him simply being left out of matches. He was banned from using the first team facilities at Carrington, couldn't enter the senior dressing room, and trained away from the main squad alongside academy players. And according to reports, he even had to eat separately. From September 2023 until January of 2024, one of the most gifted players of this generation didn't play a single minute of competitive football. By that point, any hope of repairing the relationship between Sancho and Manchester United had all but disappeared. Ten Hag had even allowed him to take a mental health break, but that hadn't helped. So United agreed to send him back to Dortmund on loan for the rest of the season. The move felt like a homecoming. Back at Signal Iduna Park, under Edin Terzic, Sancho looked like he was enjoying football again. The pressure that had followed him around at Old Trafford seemed to disappear almost overnight. His Bundesliga numbers weren't spectacular. He finished with 3 goals and 3 assists in 21 appearances, but anyone who watched him could see flashes of the old Sancho returning. And when the Champions League knockout rounds arrived, so did his best football. In the semi-final against PSG, Sancho completed 12 successful dribbles. It remains the most ever recorded by an English player in a Champions League match. I mean, he had Nuno Mendes chasing shadows, as Dortmund went on to win 1-0. For a brief moment, it felt like the football world was watching the old Sancho again. He even started the Champions League final at Wembley, but Dortmund's fairy tale run ended with a 2-0 loss to Real Madrid. After the season, Dortmund wanted to keep him, but they couldn't afford his wages. Despite rediscovering his confidence in Germany, the transfer simply wasn't financially possible. So once again, Sancho found himself heading back to Manchester United. But it didn't take long to realize that Sancho's future at Old Trafford was effectively over. On deadline day, Chelsea offered him an escape route, bringing him on a season-long loan. The deal included an obligation to buy Sancho permanently for £25 million if Chelsea finished in the Premier League's top 14. I know Chelsea have had some horrible seasons, but that looked like a condition that was almost certain to be met. But Chelsea negotiated one important safeguard. The club inserted a clause allowing them to walk away from the permanent transfer by paying Manchester United a £5 million cancellation fee. At the time, it looked like nothing more than clever legal protection. By the end of the season, it proved to be one of the smartest clauses Chelsea had ever negotiated. Now, Sancho's stint at Stamford Bridge wasn't the worst. He registered assists in each of his first 3 Premier League appearances, and even scored in Chelsea's 4-1 win over Real Betis in the UEFA Conference League final. There were times where it looked like he might be finally rebuilding his career, but once again the momentum disappeared. Throughout the season, his performances were pretty inconsistent. I mean, over 31 Premier League appearances and he just scored 3 goals. Before long, Pedro Neto, Nona Madueke had all moved ahead of him in the pecking order. So when the campaign ended, Chelsea had a decision to make. They could complete the £25 million permanent transfer and commit to Sancho's long-term wages, or they could cut their losses before making an even bigger financial commitment. After reviewing the numbers, the club decided he simply wasn't worth the investment. Instead of signing him permanently, Chelsea activated the escape clause in his contract and paid Manchester United a £5 million penalty just to send him back to Old Trafford. Think about that for a second. They paid money just to avoid signing Jadon Sancho. And keep in mind, this was after a whole season where he played under a manager who knew all about Sancho's time at Manchester City's academy, because Maresca used to be one of the academy coaches.
Yeah, I knew him from when I was at Man City, and I just knew, obviously he spoke to me on the phone about his project and what he was building here, and for a young player like myself, it's exciting. So
by the summer of 2025, Manchester United had reached a point where they simply just wanted to get Jadon Sancho off the wage bill. With just 1 year remaining on his contract, he accepted another loan move, this time joining Unai Emery's Aston Villa. Despite becoming a Europa League champion though, Sancho was never the right fit for the Claret and Blue. Emery demands relentless intensity from his wide players. His wingers are expected to press aggressively, track runners, defend as hard as they attack, and follow strict tactical instructions every minute they're on the pitch. None of those qualities match Sancho's game. Sure, he still had a lovely first touch and kept the ball well, but he lacked the physical traits to be a top-level winger in the Premier League, and he lacked goals. It's not all about stats, of course, but when you are on those wages, you gotta deliver something. It didn't take long for Emery to lose faith. Morgan Rogers, Buendia, and John McGinn all were ahead of Sancho in the pecking order, and before long, he became a little more than a squad player. As the months went on, he was barely getting on the pitch. Against Liverpool, he was sent on for a single minute. He made 39 appearances in all competitions, but only accumulated 873 minutes of football, averaging fewer than 22 minutes every time he played. Across the entire campaign, he scored just 1 goal and provided only 2 assists. The contrast with his Borussia Dortmund days couldn't have been more obvious. Then, on July 1st, 2026, Sancho's Manchester United contract finally expired. There was no farewell, no last-minute negotiations, not even a reduced contract offer. United simply walked away from a player who had cost the club well over £130 million in transfer fees and wages. And for the first time in his professional career, Sancho was without a club. At just 26 years old, the age when elite wingers are usually entering their prime, he found himself as an unattached free agent with almost no serious interest from Europe's biggest teams. So why was nobody rushing to sign him? The first problem was his wages. For years, Sancho earned more than £300,000 a week at Manchester United. Even after several disappointing seasons, dropping from that salary to the kind of wages offered by mid-table clubs is a huge adjustment. The teams that can afford those wages don't see him as good enough anymore, while the clubs that might give him a fresh start simply can't justify the financial commitment. Then there's the physical side of the game. Modern football is all about running now, and relentless work without the ball. Over the last few seasons, Sancho's numbers in those areas weaknesses have been among the weakest for attacking players across Europe's top leagues. His sprint volume, defensive work, and pressing intensity have all fallen well below what most modern managers expect from their wingers. Unless you are Messi, you can't just walk around. Tactically, he also comes with a very specific set of requirements. At his best, Sancho thrives in a possession-dominant team, where teammates combine closely around him, and he has attacking fullbacks constantly overlapping to create space. There are very few clubs who play that exact style, and even fewer are willing to redesign their entire system around a player who scored just one goal during his loan spell at Aston Villa. Then there's the reputation he's built over the years. He walked away from Manchester City after disputes over first-team opportunities. And if you thought maybe that's understandable because he was young, well, the public fallout with Erik ten Hag was far more damaging. Add in years of inconsistency, multiple loan moves, and managers repeatedly deciding they could succeed without him, and it's easy to see why sporting directors have become cautious. Nobody questions Sancho's talent. The concern is whether everything else that comes with signing him is worth the risk. If you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you will love this one too. Check it out right here.